Well, welcome everyone. My name is Janelle Molony. I am the great-granddaughter of Martha Nasch. And if you don't know, Martha Nasch spent almost 7 years confined to the Minnesota State Hospital for the Insane in St. Peter, South Central Minnesota. And while she was there, she wrote poems about people she loved and things she missed, but also she wrote poetry um, capturing some pretty difficult situations that she observed while in the asylum. And those have now been printed in a full anthology and a biography titled Poems from the Asylum by Martha Nasch, credited to her. The biographers are myself and my mother, Jodi Decker. And today we are joined by Leigh Ann Phillips from Hawaii. And Leigh Ann is a sound healer, and if you haven't heard her music yet, ooh, it's like swimming in warm, juicy. I mean, they call it sound baths for a reason. That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like you're soaking and just like a tuning fork, and your body is at ease. Oh, it's wonderful. So make sure we put links to her website, and on her website, y'all, there's free samples of her music. And I had listened to one song while I was sipping my coffee one day, and I was just like, awesome. So she has some really neat stories to tell us and share, and also information on how we use our voice, how we use sound, how we use music to heal, recover, tune, and I'm excited to hear from her. Man.
Oh, thank you so much, Janelle. So great to see you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So I met Leigh Ann, oh my goodness, maybe last week, and she had shared with me a very intriguing, I don't know what to call it now, discovery or an aha moment. And so I think that would be probably a great place for us to start of what did Leigh Ann know or hear or discover, and what is that really cool finding?
Well, Janelle, I love to meditate. In fact, in the world that we're living in these extraordinary times, I really can't imagine if I didn't do some form of meditation every day. And so I've learned to trust that little voice when I hear it. And I usually get confirmation that, oh yeah, this is the right thing to do, or, this. And um, I had shared with you a story of a friend of mine who was really intrigued with a great aunt of hers, great aunt. And her story was very compelling. She had been a nun and she had gone through extreme trauma. And my friend looked identical to her great aunt. I mean, they looked like they were the same person. And my friend was having memories that were very similar to her aunt. So she traveled to Italy so she could discover the truth. And what she did when she got there was she found out that all the journals that her aunt had written and what had happened to her were past life memories of my friend.
Oh.
That there was it really looked like my friend was the reincarnation of this other, her great aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times family members will come back to the same family. And there is a great researcher. His name is Ian, Ian Stevenson. And he has researched 3,000 different cases of people, children specifically, who had come back and said, well, these aren't my parents. These are my parents. Or had remembered, no, this person actually hurt me and I died. And they were able to verify 3,000 times the veracity of these memories of these children.
I think I've seen something like that on the news as well, where no one can explain it away, it just is what it is. But I also read that as they get older, they sort of adapt into their new life and forget about it, and that's
Right.
it.
That's right. Yeah. Once you get to the age of 7, so, to kind of tie it into sound, between the ages of 0 and 2, we're mostly in the delta brain state because we're sleeping. So it's a very low brain wave. If you can just imagine if you and I were at the beach in Santa Monica and we were watching the waves and we say we counted 6 waves a minute, our brains work much faster and it would be more like waves or cycles per second. So for delta, for the sleep, that's the lowest amount of waves per second. But once you get to the age of 2 up to 7, the brain states of children are predominantly in theta. So theta is that you're not really aware of the external world as much, but more so your internal world. And so this is why people can say, oh, I will never drink or be an alcoholic because my parents were one. But for those 5 years, they were just, that subconscious program was sent to them. So they ended up as adults having to really work to make sure that that didn't happen.
Right. It's that when we have imaginary friends as well, where we can truly see beyond what we have in front of our own eyes.
Exactly. And my husband has a great story of his imaginary friends that were not imaginary, and that he would fly through his window at night. So it wasn't his physical body, but it was his astral body. And there was a family he would meet and play with most evenings for a couple years. And
just getting out and escape. Was he a teenager when this happened? That sounds very teenager-like.
No. He was in that nice theta brainwave. So he was probably around 5 years old, and then it stopped. So, but he has fond memories of meeting with this family. So, but to get back to the connection with sound and the soul. So when I was in meditation, and, I really enjoyed your presentation at the Pranic World Festival. That was actually how I discovered you, in the middle of the night, just not wanting to sleep, and watched your presentation. And in meditation, I heard Martha Nasch is Janelle Molony, that you've come back. And it was so strong that I reached out to you and I said, this could be crazy. And, just, put it to the side if it doesn't resonate. And then you shared a couple similarities that, we talked about. So with health issues, things like that. But anyway, I have been studying the living soul for many, many years, and the connection to sound healing, because sound is we have sound in our life all the time, almost every waking moment. It affects us so much more than we realize. And you can tell so much about a person from the quality of their voice. Most arguments happen, I read a study years ago, most arguments happen 90% of the time, not from what is said, the words, but from the quality.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. So, so there's a connection between literally our physical DNA and sound, and that we can activate some of what is called the silent DNA or the inactive DNA with certain mantras and certain sounds.
Is that the genetic, if you want to go to the family tree stuff, that's genetics that are passed down, that, for example, if I'm an artist, I might have several artists in my family tree going down, because that becomes part of me. And so it actually might end up being part of my DNA or part of my composition that can be passed down. Or even, I think some people are familiar with generational trauma. So things that we invite or are forced onto us become part of us. And if they're not dealt with, end up getting passed down.
I have a pretty graphic story to describe with you, and
I'm gonna put you on pause because I got 2 dogs that are about to fight.
Okay.
And good thing we can edit this out.
Okay, I'm gonna pause too.
Get out. Thank you. Woo-hoo.
Okay.
Got one puppy and one old lady, and they don't mix. Okay. Sorry. We were just
Okay.
talking about generational trauma or skills and passions.
Okay. So there's kind of, it's a multifaceted situation when you have that kind of situation. So when something is passed down from generation to generation, let's say it's depression, or let's say it's alcoholism, what we call that an ancestral miasm. So if there is an issue that hasn't been worked out with a certain relative, then often that energetic component that's in that person's bioenergetic field is looking for another place to land.
Next of kin, why not?
So it's very interesting. So, and I'll give you a graphic example, and it's graphic, but I have permission to share it from a friend of mine who's a counselor. So she had a client that came to her that had, his legs were starting to be an issue. He couldn't feel them and he was really getting concerned. Something was wrong. And so my friend asked him, do you have this issue in your family? And he goes, actually, I do. So he went back 3 or 4 generations to a grandfather, great grandfather, who had bludgeoned somebody and put them on railroad tracks, bludgeoned their legs and put them on a railroad track, and they got run over and died. Their relative, their son, this is all sons, their son then ended up having their legs amputated.
Whoa.
From health issues. Their son ended up having an issue where they couldn't walk and their legs were, I believe, either numb or they just couldn't walk. Their legs didn't work. And now this person was showing up with numbness in their legs and very concerned that something was going to happen. So she did a series of work. So to let go of trauma, talking about it actually makes it worse. It amplifies and embeds the trauma further. So a lot of, yes,
it's giving it attention.
Right. It's giving an attention, and it's embedding it deeper, right? So if there's cortisol that hasn't been released from a trauma, once you talk about it, you re-release the trauma, the cortisol and the trauma are connected. So there's a wonderful, wonderful book called PTSD, Time to Heal by Kathy with a C, O'Brien, Obrien. And the techniques in that book are actually from an FBI whistleblower who the FBI trained how to release trauma because of their work.
Oh, with victims, but perhaps if there's not the victim, but the person that did the crime, and you're able to trigger a release, well, there's a confession, maybe. or it just makes the whole process a little easier. Similar, it sounds to me similar like when we do EMDR to help get beyond the thoughts that are blocking, repressing, and just get to the truth.
That's another whole component, right? Because when you get to the truth, you know, what is actual, not as phenomenon, that can be very, very healing. Very, very healing, because a lot of times people will have beliefs, but you don't need a belief if it's actual. So discernment is really key, to be able to discern between what is actual and what is a belief or what is phenomena. So with this gentleman that went to see my friend, he then did somatic work and didn't talk about it and released it. And from what I understand, no more leg problems. So what he did was he stopped an ancestral miasm. It kept going and going and going. And as you see through the story, it lessened and lessened and lessened as it cleared. So everybody has trauma. There's but you can't live in this world and not have trauma just from the birth experience.
Right. I'm an adoptive mother, and that was harped on us. They're like, your kid's trauma is nothing special. Every kid that's born is going to have their own set of whatever. I think it's interesting that you mentioned trauma because I used to volunteer with a international healing rooms ministry, and so I returned back this week because of some digestive issues I've been having. And there are in this ministry laying of hands, there's prayers, there's music, there's prophecies and visions and such. And so when I was there, they pinpointed exactly the aches, the pains, the inflammation, the location in my body, and they said, God knows exactly what's going on. And when I compare this to what the doctors have been saying about why it's tough for me to eat these days, and that resonates with Martha, but I refuse. I just refuse to acknowledge it. I'll just throw that out there. So it resonates, and I thought that was interesting that they just called it all out, and they're like, God sees this, but he wants you to know that you are physically fine. You are healed, and this is trauma. And then I thought, I have trauma in my what? So I just think that's funny that you bring that up, because I have no reason to have the symptoms I'm having. None at all. In fact, I went to, I had a rather invasive procedure done, and they evaluated how much inflammation was going on inside my GI tract to find out why I'm having trouble swallowing my food, why I'm having trouble digesting it, why one meal a day is like, that's it. That's all I can manage right now. And they said, oh, my esophagus was malformed and swollen shut. They had to use tools to help get in there. I've got some stomach acid issues, which they're like, well, do you have, acid reflux? No, I don't. No, I do not have acid reflux. But my body was presenting with that and presenting with all these other issues. And then a week later, I went in for an x-ray, and prior to that, I had prayed with some very trusted individuals who said, I'm about done with this. I don't want this anymore. Let's just make it all go away, right? Let's agree we're not gonna have this. So the x-ray was only to the stomach. And when I went in for the x-ray and they were looking for assessing the extent of the damage, there is none. They had tubes in me and fighting to get through. And then 1 week later, all of it was gone. Now that's to my stomach. So I'm believing we got to get rid of the second half of this problem. But I found that interesting that that decision, that intention of, no, this is not okay anymore. We're done. And then the body obeyed.
Yes. Well, to back that up, and I think that's wonderful you did that, because you accessed a part of you that is more subconscious or unconscious, or what you could even call the dream self. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when I go to bed at night and I have an issue I'm working through, whether it's health, family, I'll just say out loud, Creator, please help me remedy this situation. And then I just say, thank you for your assistance, because we're co-creating with the Creator. And often, even if I don't remember the dream, it works out. Something happens the next day to let me know there's been a shift. So I think that's fantastic you did that. Mm-hmm. And that is also just showing how powerful not just our minds are, but our physical bodies are. I mean, we're a walking miracle when you think about all the different systems and bones and muscles and nervous system and endocrine system, brain and heart, so to get back to the other part, because you were talking about if an artist, a grandmother artist, then daughter artist, and then granddaughter artist, there's also something with the soul. The soul has an anatomy, and there's an aspect of the soul. One of those parts of the soul is called the nomen, and the nomen is an expression of not just our biological parents, but our spiritual parents. Mm-hmm. So if you think in terms of the Creator gives birth to each one of us, right? And we are an aspect of the creator. We are the creator in a sense. He's giving birth to us so he can have
Part of
this,
him. Hmm.
right? So we can have this experience of co-creating. Then whatever that gnomon can do, that expression of it, maybe it would make a fantastic lawyer or an artist or, even archery, just something that is a creation of that aspect of the gnomon. And so I have seen that with families. I mean, do you have obviously poetry is in your family, art, a form of art. Is there anything else that's kind of come down through your ancestry?
Definitely, I would say it's more of a writing thing. And so we have Martha Nasch, who wrote the poetry, and I'm not entirely certain about her mother. But then my grandmother, who's Ralph, Martha had Ralph, and Ralph married Marie. So it's not a direct line, but my grandmother Marie wrote award-winning poetry, published poet, author, playwright. And then my mother from them became an author and writing teacher, and that came down to me. And so we do have a really serious, not just a passion, a mandate. I would say we have to write. We have to. It's what we do. It's who we are. So I think that's definitely visible in the family for sure. In general, there is a trend towards infertility issues. If we go towards from positive to negative, there's always been issues with that, starting with Martha. And for 4 generations, it seems like there are infertility issues. And I often wonder about that with Martha's situation, because she had 8 siblings, 2 didn't make it. But she didn't come from a small family, but she lost her dad when she was 14. And so I don't know if that impact had something to do with what she ended up doing in her life and experiencing. And then she married someone who swept her off her feet, Lewis. He was a dandy, hard worker, but also potentially cheated on her multiple times. And so I think about myself, if my partner, who is the love of my life, cheated on me repeatedly, I don't know that I would want to now make a bunch of babies with him, you know? So I wonder if part of that was a shutdown. And then generationally, my grandparents went, so they went 8 years without kids, and the grandparents went another 8 to 10 years without kids. They actually started the adoption process and then got pregnant in that process. And then me as well, my sister as well, and actually several of our cousins, that kids just are hard to come by.
Well, it's interesting with infertility because usually, one aspect is it's more challenging to get pregnant if you have any health issues. The body will not get pregnant if it's needing to heal.
In a preservation way.
Exactly. And then the other aspect that you brought up is the trauma. So I like to think of the womb as kind of an upside down heart. So you have your heart here, and then you have kind of another heart, because there's a really strong connection between the heart and the womb. And for women, the womb is the power center. It's our second heartbeat. If you go back into indigenous, literature and research, there was a real strong connection between the womb, a woman's power center, and the heart, which the heart, as we've, discovered through institutes like Heart Math and other research, there are immortal brain cells in the heart. Your heart thinks, right?
It has memory.
That's right. So, if Martha had a pretty big trauma losing her dad at 14, and that's right when, in most indigenous tribes, 14 is when we actually become adults and we go out into the world. So it would make sense that she would have some kind of a shutdown, because there's no stronger connection biologically, physically, than our parents. When we lose a parent, it is a small death for us, because their cells are so closely knit to ours. So, you know,
And it's
and
male hurt too. Hurt
oh,
by a male.
she was hurt
Com
by,
yeah,
by
compounded by repeated hurts by her own husband, and then the difficulty getting pregnancy, and then even giving birth to my grandfather. From what we know, she had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital before and after giving birth, and she was pretty wrecked.
yeah. So what will happen with a soul is a soul will sometimes have to heal over lifetimes, you know? So, and I saw this with some sound healing work I was doing in Colorado with children is, and the parents, the parents were freaking out a little bit, but I did a sound healing circle with about 12 kids, and they were at range from 7 years to 16. They were in high school, middle school, elementary school. And during the sound, what I learned is with children, because they're more sensitive and they're more open, they don't need as much. But I kind of learned in this situation because some of the children in the middle of the session were saying, I feel like I have a knife in my stomach, or I'm remembering something, and they were remembering how they died in their past life.
Whoa.
And you cannot, so the point of bringing this up is it's very challenging to let go of trauma when you're dying from it.
Hmm.
You don't have another opportunity until your next lifetime. So if a soul has digestive issues and they don't resolve them, there's an aspect of the soul called the tammuz. And the tammuz goes from, it connects from the unconscious area of the soul into the next birth.
Is this what you were describing as soul pieces, or something that's been broken off or left?
Well, if you can imagine your soul, just imagine it's probably about this size. Just imagine it as a faceted gemstone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 0.5 grams to 1.5 grams. And Massachusetts General Hospital did a fantastic study many years ago where they took people who were dying and they placed them on these, so the person's in a bed and then they're on a big scale, and they weighed them right before they passed, and then they weighed them after they passed. And that was the weight difference, was 0.5 to 1.5 grams. And so they determined in this medical study that it was the soul leaving the body. That was the weight of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So the soul from my studies it's a gemstone. It's like a gemstone. In fact, I can show you before we leave a picture of what the soul looks like.
Interesting.
So if you can just imagine a gemstone with 617 soul facets, just like a gemstone has facets.
Mm-hmm.
And then each one of those soul facets has 5 different parts.
Okay.
So somebody has a trauma often, and if you see like a spark, just a spark, say you fall off a ladder or trip, or even if you're having dental work and you're really afraid, you can kind of flip off a soul facet.
Huh.
If you have enough trauma happen and you disperse enough of these soul facets, you can leave a tiny little hole in your soul. And when that happens, it allows more of what we call deconstructive or the inverse Sephirotic energy to come in. It's easier to have things happen.
Hmm.
So how you know that you've got
Soul
enough,
wound.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So how you know you're having enough negative energy start to enter your body, not just your field, is if you because negative energy enters through the hands and through the feet. So if you trip or injure your finger or you sprain a toe, that should be a red flag that you have, either anger or worry or doubt or fear, something building that you haven't been able to be conscious of.
I know when I stub my toe, I have lots and lots of negativity. Maybe it's just because I'm a redhead, though, so they say.
No, no, no. Nice try, but no, beautiful red hair does not allow more toe damage. So, so this is what I love about the body, is the body always tells us the truth.
Hmm.
So, so to get back to your question, it's the soul is our greatest gift. And, we don't talk about it enough. We're not given enough information about what is the soul? Where did we come from? What is it about people that are really young and remembering these memories that they didn't have, but they did have, their soul had in
Hmm.
another circumstance.
Hmm.
So it's a great, beautiful mystery.
The idea of myself being a soul in a skin sack of sorts is just wild and baffling. But I do definitely acknowledge that when we consider, okay, when we die, something happens. You go somewhere. There's, legitimacy on that one. So I think about that, and okay, so what's next? Like this is not it for me. I know that. And I've had enough interactions with my maternal grandmother who I thought I was maybe crazy for a little bit. When she passed, the veil was, I guess, becoming more and more transparent. She started to see family members and loved ones when she was making that transition, and she was able to talk to them, and they were like standing next to people. She could make eye contact with them. And I've heard many instances of that, and even people seeing Jesus and literally just walking up to him, holding his hand, and then they just walk off into the sunset. Or that sounds great. So when my grandmother passed, she would actually appear in my dreams, but she didn't obey my dreams. She was, she was just there with me, and she would talk to me and check in on me. And my grandmother Marie was, some people had said about her, she could fill a vacuum with sound. She would talk like her life depended on talking. And I don't think she'd like me saying that. Sorry, Grandma. But yeah, you talk a lot. But she would be in my dreams, yammering on. And I remember one time when she would show up as just like coming to hang out with me at night. And I said, Grandma, you are dead. I know you're dead. You need to go and be dead. And she disappeared. She did not come back for a month. And I was like, oh, I offended her clearly. And then she started visiting again, and she told me she was going to visit my sister. And I said, okay. And sure enough, within a week, my sister, oh, I just had the weirdest dream. And Grandma was in my dream, but she wasn't in my dream. She was like alive, and she was talking to me. And I was like, I know. And
Well,
my mother too, she experienced that. So I know there's some, once we leave our bodies, that's not the end.
right. Well, how long had your grandmother passed when she came to you in that dream? How long had it been?
I want to say it was within 2 months, and it lasted until around 2 or 3 months after my grandfather had passed as well. And she revisited, and I said, hey, how you been? And she said, I'm fine, and I'm going home now. Or something like, I can go home now that Grandpa was with her. And that's the last I heard of her. And I'm just happy that they're together. So that also reminds me that things like soul ties or soul connections are very real, because again, once we leave our bodies, there is more to the story, and the people you love, the people that you keep close and link your soul to, will still, they're still part of you, even when you're not in your body.
It is. And you're bringing up a really good point, because one way we can help our ancestors is ancestral offerings.
Hmm.
So in most of the world, they leave out a little bit of food, light a white candle, burn some ancestral money, and they keep helping and feeding their ancestors. So,
Finishing their sentences
right.
or finishing their mission.
So 100 years ago, if one of our relatives passed and we would go to their house for a service, we would bring food. But that food wasn't for the people that were there. The food was for the person that had passed.
Ah, bummer.
Right. So because they still needed the energy. So that's why I asked you about how long it had been, because on average, it takes about 49 to 50 days for the soul to completely leave the physical body.
That kind of lines up.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
right. So when we help the ancestors, and remember them, it's a form of remembering them too, by feeding them every day.
Mm.
Uh, they help us. They help us. And, I'm a little embarrassed that I kind of wanted to keep my ancestors at bay for years because there had been suicides, probably a homicide or even a murder,
Yeah, let's
all,
not invite that in.
right, all that stuff. And I just kind of was like, my maternal side of the family, I didn't really want to deal with them. And then I kept having fender benders, losing my wallet, my keys. And I thought, what is going on?
Mm.
And I remember my mentor sat down with me and he said, your ancestors aren't happy that you've kind of blown them off. He says, you need to start doing ancestor offerings. And Janelle, I can tell you that I haven't had a fender bender since, haven't lost my wallet. It's like they were trying to get my attention because they were wanting me to help them.
Mm.
So,
And vice versa, it sounds like.
so since then, each morning I light a white candle and I put out a little food and I just say, I freely give this to my ancestors. So they know that it's coming from a benevolent force and not a dark force, as if, oh, if I give you food, you're going to want something from me, because some ancestors do worry about that when they pass.
That's interesting. The intention is really important, really. I wonder about that with Martha, if her spirit or soul was like, Janelle, what you doing? What you doing down there? And I wonder what she would think about how she was totally shut down and now someone's not going to get shut down. Someone can now broadcast to the world on Facebook and validate her. And I wonder if that's similar to that offering of, this is what I can do. This, I hear you, and I can do this for you.
Right. I kind of get the feeling with your mission is that there's a lot of healing going on, not just acknowledgement, but a lot of healing. So let's just say that, because Martha Nasch, even though, let's just say her soul still has an aspect of herself in the ancestral world.
Mm-hmm.
So even when we're here, there's an aspect of us that's there. There's an overlap between the physical world and the higher astral world.
Coexistence.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you connected with your relatives for that specific relative for that month or two, you found an overlap, a portal in a essence, where you could actually connect with them. And they work really hard to make that happen.
Hmm.
That's not something, this is why it's really special when it happens. It takes a lot of effort on their part. She was really trying to reach you.
Hmm.
So, and then, when you told her that, you're not really physical anymore, you might want to go to the light, hint, hint, right? So, for your followers, a really wonderful movie that explains, I think it's the best movie I've ever seen that explains what happens to us after we pass, is called Astral City.
Hmm.
And it was a 21st Century Fox full-blown motion picture, but it was based in South America. So it's in subtitles, but the movie is beautiful. And it really helps us explain that when we pass, we don't really die. Our consciousness is intact. And then we get to kind of go back to school in a way, right? We get to kind of do the life review, see what we did. They're looking to see how many people, did we save lives? Did we take lives? Who did we serve? What was our higher mission? Or did we just get kind of distracted and not really fulfill the purpose of coming here? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a bigger purpose. If you go back to, you were talking about Jesus Christ and, the resurrection. In a lot of different cultures, we call that developing the light body.
Hmm.
The aspect of us that is immortal or light that lives on after our physical body passes.
That's right. Easter's coming up. I forgot to mention. So happy early Easter to everyone.
So, the soul is, excuse me, the soul is an incredible gift from the Creator. And the more we understand that we're here for a greater purpose, we're here to evolve, and it's our birthright. It's our birthright to not eat as much. It's our birthright to not drink as much. It's our birthright to be happy.
Well, who tells us that we have to eat more? I think that's also interesting because we didn't used to look like we look now. We didn't have so many disorders and diseases did not exist until recently. So at some point, someone very good at marketing convinced us that we have to consume a certain amount of food every single day, calories specifically, and then the whole food pyramid thing. I've looked into that and what you have to drink. I remember there was an entire push in the Depression era to drink cow's milk. And it was completely a marketing ploy to increase sales, of course. And I thought about myself when I switched to vegetarian vegan diet lifestyle. And I remember the doctors were like, "You're not going to get enough protein. You're not going to get enough calcium." And they would do my blood work and it was totally fine.
So what year did Martha Nasch pass? What year?
1970.
Okay. So back in around the 40s to the 60s, there was a movement that came out that was called natural hygiene. And they were curing every single disease you can possibly imagine. There's a great book called Fasting Can Save Your Life. This gentleman, this doctor, wrote many, many books. And it was all about water fasting, because you're absolutely right. The truth is we don't need food. And specifically dairy is not easy on the physical body. It's not. It's very challenging to digest. The body really can't digest it the way it can other things.
And the hormonal consequences are so obvious, especially in our children today, the way that they're growing. And there's so much to be said about that. And no judgment to anyone who does dairy, but I've learned personally from cutting out a lot of dairy that my body works better.
That's right. That's right. So with the natural hygiene, and just like you were saying, I'm bouncing around here, but we're told that we can't, live past 3 weeks of no food, 3 days of no water, 3 minutes of no air. And, I personally have not drunk or eaten for 4 days straight. I've held my breath for 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I have a friend can hold his breath for 22 minutes.
Whoa.
So, and when these things start to happen, we are actually activating another aspect of our soul called the prima. And the prima is that divine spark of the Creator. It's that fuel. It's the fuel. So when you don't eat or don't drink, the prima starts to take charge and run your body. So people talk about, if you don't eat, you go into, you start to
like
activate
ketosis and such.
Right. All that. And that's true on a biological level. But on a DNA level, we activate some of our DNA that's inactive. So when we're told, just like you were saying, we're told we need enough protein and all that, we're told we only use 3% of our DNA and 97% is junk. No, I don't think so. It's just inactive. It's silent.
Hmm.
So I'm going to just tie this into sound. There was a gentleman who passed away last year, an incredible Russian scientist that determined that DNA translates language. It literally translates language. Gerezhov is his name. I can give you the spelling after our talk. So that means that if DNA can literally translate language, it can translate sound.
Hmm.
And that's how I got into eating less, not in the past year, but I've put on some of my chronic weight from the stress of my aunt passing away, which is another story. But let's just say in this study, which he did, he found certain mantras and certain prayers activated the silent DNA, which means that the more of the DNA that is active, the more you really are able to access the skills and your birthrights of your soul.
Hmm. And this lines up biblically with prayer and fasting in combination. When we set our intention, set our heart, and remove ourselves from our crutches that kind of, I think, silence some of that awareness. When we're hungry, no, it's the only thing we can think about. Um, and we wait for our next meal, we look forward to dinner. It takes up a major portion of my personal day because I love eating. But once that has been removed, what else do you have to do? You have to start go into the other places in your mind and start thinking about other things and start tending to some needs that you have maybe covered up. And so I do know in Matthew, there's a verse about when you need that breakthrough. It's not just hey help, but it's prayer and fasting together create breakthrough, that things, miracles are unlocked and you get to the next level when you step aside from those physical crutches and you say, let's get this done. So full heart, mind, body, soul, all in alignment towards that intention of that prayer and hope.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, interestingly, Ramadan is next week. And
Oh,
don't they do, I mean, I don't practice that,
mhm.
but I believe in that religion, they do 40 days of no food, no water. We have the
Yeah.
spring equinox on Monday, I believe, or Tuesday. I think maybe Tuesday. And that's the time of spring cleaning and detoxification. I mean, this is really the time we want to clean out our bodies.
Mhm.
But and I bring that up because there's something you can do for the ancestors called a hard karma cleanse.
Mm.
It's no food, no water from sunrise to sunset for 40 days. And then an offering of a meal, lighting a white candle and offering a meal, and then doing certain prayers, you know, just to help care for the ancestors. And at the same time, you give your body a break because you're absolutely right. I mean, when I do water fasting or intermittent fasting, because we eat basically one meal a day together when we're
Mhm.
eating, I have so much more time. I'm not shopping, I'm not cooking, I'm not cleaning, I'm not eating. I mean, it's like a good 2 hours extra a day that I can
For all
wait.
the women out there, you might want to consider this. All the wives with multiple children, we're all going to have like at least one fasted meal a day. Yeah.
And the truth is, I feel better.
Hmm.
I feel better. I feel better when I don't eat a lot or when I don't eat at all. So that picture that's on Facebook, I had not eaten in 6 weeks. I had just done some fluids. And I've been trying to change that picture because I don't look that way right now. But it was incredibly empowering, Janelle, to realize that we've been told we need certain things because there's a lot of money in big food
Hmm.
and big pharma. So,
Hmm.
it's a freedom. It's really not about your weight or what you look like. It's about freedom. So I would like to share a little secret since we've been talking about the creator so much and
Sure.
our connection. But honey is food that can really feed our soul. Honey has, it doesn't go bad. They have found honey in crypts in Egypt, 5,000 years old, that you can still eat. So, and we couldn't live here without bees. There's something very celestial about bees.
Yeah, there's been a lot of research on that. We have to save the bees. We don't have to eat, but we have to save the bees. Pick and choose your battles here. Woof. Bees are, yeah, a whole nother conversation.
Well, and I do want to tie it back to sound, because the sound is so important. And we've been kind of talking about all sorts of things, which I love, ancestry, trauma, all these things that are really important to understand. So, but the sound of a bee, the beekeepers actually have the longest lifespan of any occupation. And it's because of the sound of the bee. So the sound of the bee is literally the bee note. So you can go on YouTube and listen to the sounds of the bees. It's actually a form of cellular rejuvenation.
What?
Yes. So it goes back to the power of sound.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
right. And, if it's okay, I would like to share, it's in the mother tongue of Jesus Christ. His mother tongue, I believe, was Aramaic.
Mhm.
And there's a prayer called the Miracle Prayer, and it's in the language of Aramaic.
Oh, do you know it in English?
Well, it really can't be translated into English. It's the 42 names of God. So basically, in Aramaic, when you say it, you are saying, you are putting out the vibrations of what you're saying, if that makes sense. So it goes back to being able to decode the silent DNA, because it sounds that the DNA understands as benevolent.
They
So
they
basically,
know his name. The created knows his name and will acknowledge it and respond even in a different language, which lines up biblically with how some are able to speak in tongues and some are able to interpret those messages. And there's no intellectual or educational explanation for that because the created knows the creator. It just is.
that's right.
Yeah.
So the prayer basically invokes protection and it invokes miracles.
Mhm.
And I believe Life magazine back in the 1990s did an article on this prayer, and they found that people who either memorized it or heard it had these real deal miracles happen. New engines in their car, a man in white would rescue somebody from a mugging. I mean, real miracles you couldn't dismiss.
Mhm.
So the power, and if you go to the miracle prayer, Dr. Mitchell Gibson, or just Google the miracle prayer, but it's called in Aramaic, it's called the Anabakoach.
Okay.
So if you can just imagine that, if there's a scientific, it's called cymatics, and it was invented by Hans Jenny back in the 1940s. And there's a man named John Stewart Reed who has continued his work. And what Hans Jenny did was he would say Om,
Mhm.
Om, and he would have an electric plate, right, plugged in, vibrating with sand on the top. And as he said the vibration, the sand would create the letter Om.
Ah! This is like the sand and the ice,
Emoto.
yes, when you speak the words that are positive, negative, or with certain intentions, physical items, physical molecular changes happen in the items that are undeniable.
That's right. So if you can just suspend the left brain, not you, but if people can just suspend the left brain for a moment and be open to the fact that what's called a divine world prayer. So when we say divine world prayer, that means that this prayer doesn't just work here, but if you wanted to send it to Martha Nasch in the ancestral world, you could recite the prayer on her behalf.
I've honestly never prayed for her. I've never prayed for her healing or for her to be restored or at peace, or just to encourage her to, it'll be okay. We'll get through this. Like, I wonder.
I think your book is just one big prayer, because on some level, I know she knows you wrote it. And there's a healing in being heard and being seen. So just know that even if it hasn't been a literal prayer, you have prayed for her.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for that, because just because we're not here anymore doesn't mean we don't need the healing. I learned that from Donna, come in the dream time.
So I'm excited for you to share the healing prayer, or speaking the names of Jesus, the name of our Creator, that even in my observations, I'm gonna be careful because there's a big confidentiality on this. In my observations working in the international healing rooms, it doesn't matter if someone can actually physically hear you. And it does not matter if they believe or not.
Right.
Healing happens. The cells will, the molecules will respond. And so I'm excited for you to share that with us. Thank you.
All right. So here, this is called the Anabakoach, or the miracle prayer. Anabakoach, Gijilaya Minsha, Tatir, Tatasara, Kabel Renat, Amcha Sagvanu, Taharai Nunara, Nagibor, Dorsheyu Kateka, Kavavat Shambrem, Barken Taharam, Rakame Dazi Kateka, Timid Gamlen, Chastin Kadosh, Barav Tuvka, Nahel Adateka, La Kifke, Lam Chapane, Zogre Gedushateka, Shavatanu Kabel, Ushma Zaakatanu, Yodea Ta'alamut, Baruch Shem, Kavomalkuto, Leolam Vayat. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And so in English, we're identifying Jesus as a creator, our healer, our provider, our nurturer, our defender, the flag bearer, our savior, and our source of strength. And I'm repeating this, but not in any kind of order that lines up. But those are some of the declarations in English that we acknowledge that you provide. All of these things are literally our breath and our strength and our energy and the soundness of our mind. That is who you are, and what happens when we make those declarations. And so I love that. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm curious though, when we put our words and our declarations on paper, like, I imagine there's a certain amount of power, energy that's released by speaking, power to create, power to heal. What about for those who write, for example, poetry? Now people are starting to figure out that poetry can be used as a form of therapy, or art therapy expression. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, if you don't say the words out loud, but we know our thoughts have power too. We have the ability, from what I understand, our brain can literally shut us down. If we start sending messages of negative thoughts, or shut down, we can do that. We can create disorder and disease, or we can tell ourselves in our minds we are healed and we, can rise above and all this. So the power of our thoughts. But what happens when we just put it on paper? Does it have any energy left?
Well, if I can answer it in two parts. So in terms of sound, you have the external world, our words, and you have internal sound, which is our thoughts. So at the end of the day, when we're judged by our being, we're really, in a way, monitored more by our thoughts than our actions, because our thoughts drive our actions. And they've done studies. I can't say who they is, but I remember reading a study years ago that about 70% of most people's thoughts are negative.
That's a lot.
So you're bringing up a really good point about how important it is that if you have a negative thought, to shift it.
Mhm.
Don't wait, shift it. Okay. As far as words, there is an incredible connection that happens between our brain and our heart when we write it down. And that's one of the main ways we can let go of trauma is by
Mm.
writing our trauma and not talking about it. So
Like you mentioned at the beginning. Yeah, get it out, deal with it, address it, process it, and physically remove it
that's
almost.
right. So I would recommend for people who want to heal through the power of writing that they do not type it, but they write it by hand.
Hmm.
When you write it by hand, it makes that connection with your heart and your brain. There's something that happens that you're letting it go. When you type it, there's a bit of a disconnect.
Hmm.
So, I know that, oh, what is the gentleman, Wayne Dyer? I know that he hand wrote all of his books and he didn't do a lot of editing. He just wrote.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes when we just, if we can write and not stop and cross things out and just no editing and just write it out, I think that it's a form of healing. I mean, what do you think?
I think there's something to that, especially when you consider, if we go back to the FBI, how they can analyze what's coming out of your hand and the almost mental state of the person that was writing it is in those pen marks or pencil marks and signatures. I often wonder. I have the letter M. Where I write it with the loopy, hoopy curves, and then sometimes I write it with the jagged ones. And I have no explanation for why, but I do notice it. I think it has something to do with my mood or my feeling, if I'm going to be a little edgy, or if I'm like, if I write my son's name, it's always loopy. I don't know. But I do notice that in Martha's handwriting. And I, at some point, so I have her actual poems from the asylum in a binder now. And at some point, her handwriting changed. And I don't want to theorize or hypothesize on what happened, but to show an example, let's see how close I can get this without everything falling apart. So her first poem has it's fading already. It's very tight cursive. It seems like the pressure on the page is quite heavy and dark, and the letters maybe a third of the time even reach halfway up the line.
Can I see
So
it one more time? Can
yeah,
you?
I'm actually going to take it out of the binder so I can bring it closer, and then I'll pull out one from later. Oh, it's on the back. This is beautiful. Okay, so I don't know if that's more visible. This is her first poem, The World. We have her dedication to her sister with it.
Okay.
Very tight. And then at some point, we know that this book spanned 2 years of her 7 there. At some point, her handwriting actually changed. And I went round and round to, did she have a mental breakdown? What happened that her handwriting just boom became something different? And that different is outstanding. And I don't
That's
believe it has something to do with, oh, she just got better at handwriting. But it's so light on the paper. And as you can see, this is the same paper front and back. So there's nothing's bleeding through. So very light, large, loopy, more like embellishment, and it's consistent slanting. Something happened where her handwriting went from forceful, dark, and small to tall, like there's breath in it, tall, light, and embellished. And that's just, I don't know, one of the mysteries that are still in there. There's an entire analysis on it in the book, very in depth.
well, when the handwriting goes more to the right, that person is more of service, happier, so she definitely looks more at peace with her handwriting later.
Yeah. So the original or the earlier version is very, very rigid up and down. And
Yeah.
then the new stuff is just has this really beautiful slant, and it's very consistent. I would aspire to write like that, and I apologize for those that are watching. It is hard to get this. As many times as I've opened this binder, we have seen the colors of the page change, and we've seen some crumble already. So I'm already feeling like we need to get this into a museum and have them properly take care of it. So yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Even in our writing, the brain, the heart, the body can get that alignment and even release. And I think more studies are coming out about that more and more. And it's not, in my opinion, an alternative woo-woo thing. It's just flat out science. It's just flat, I mean, it's just facts at this point, which I think Martha would appreciate having someone acknowledge that, in her opinion, she was cured, and they never identified her as being cured or healthy or able to be released, other than kicking her out for reforms. She was not hurting herself. So they're like, why are you here? Go. But I can tell that she had been healed for a while, considering half the book it has this reform in it. So, well, I have really enjoyed having you with us. I don't know, do you have your sound bowls nearby?
You know, they're up in my office, so I don't. Then it takes about 20 minutes to set them up. But if it's okay, can we just wrap up and talk about the Mikael a little bit? Because that's something that I'm trying to get out in the world because of what's going on in the world.
Yes. And I have to say, I listened to it and it's delicious. It is delicious. And your voice is so beautiful. And if I want to be super just a horrible person, I would send it to everyone in the world. But here is the real deal. She's going to tell you how to get your hands on it because you need it. Sorry, you need it.
Well, the album that you're talking about, Janelle, is called Mikael, and I named it after Archangel Michael because I felt like he had saved me in a car accident years ago. So this was my tribute to him. So, but it was in a scientific study in England with John Stewart Reed, and he determined that when you listen to this album for 20 minutes, it increases red blood cell production 18 times. And he did this with several different kinds of music, white noise, classical, rock and roll. And he thinks it's because it's a combination of the bowls and vocal tracks that it had a higher level of red blood cell production than most of the albums in the study. So because so many people are dealing with health issues right now, I've lowered the price from $20 for the album to $5. And it's my mission this year, just like you have your beautiful book tour coming up. I'm trying to do kind of a musical tour because I'm not touring anymore with the bowls. I'm just on the island of Hawaii right now, getting the music out there to help people heal, because it's been scientifically proven, because red blood cell production is the second best way to increase immunity. So, music really can heal. And I really look forward to the day that people don't go to a drugstore for a prescription for a drug, but they actually go to get a prescription of music for depression or for, an eating disorder or for cancer, and that's a whole nother story, because there is music out there that can help kill cancer cells. But I just, invite you to check out the album and maybe gift it to a friend, because I just know this can help. And if somebody can afford the $5, email me and I'll give it to you. I want this music to get out there. It really, really can make a difference. And this isn't the only music that can help, but it's what I can offer right now. So.
And I'll attest to that. It is beautiful. Again, I don't know. The word juicy and savory comes to mind. It is so palatable. You will feel I mean, no joke, you will feel your body say, ah. I agree. So I'm hoping that we'll get all those links with this video, and I'm happy to promote sound healing in general. I know how powerful it is. It's why we do prayers out loud and we worship out loud. And it doesn't matter if you have a good singing voice or not, but just that release and that attunement is so important. And I don't know, maybe there's those people that they just think when they sing the shower, that's special. That's a moment where they are so vulnerable and they feel better. It's that same concept. So if you like singing in the shower, you can sing along to Mikhail. You can. I started just saying, thank you, Jesus. I'm not kidding. I started saying, thank you for what you're doing in my life, and just enjoying it so much. And you can overlay those prayers with it and overlay those declarations with it. And it just marries so well. So, and you can marinate in it enough.
Well, when you sing, all of that sound is literally massaging into your cells, So when you were talking about, okay, is there power in the thoughts? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. If you want to get the most bang for your buck with a mantra or a prayer, then saying it. And so I just like to end on one final thought, is that this is why it's important to not use swear words, because they kill ourselves. We want to let go of thinking those words or saying them, and you watch your health escalate in vitality just by doing that. It was very humbling when I let go of saying certain words, and my body let me know, wow, this is making a big difference. So I just wanted to share that, because the power of sound is powerful. We just want it to be of construction and not deconstructive energy.
Well, there's my call to action, everyone. There's my call to action.
Thank you for letting me share that.
For sure. Thank you, everyone, so much. Again, we'll post those links to go with this video. Thanks for your patience as we worked out that live snafu. It's okay. It's okay. Something good has definitely come from this meeting. I appreciate you, Leigh Ann. Thank you again, everyone, for watching. Please put questions or comments with the video, because Leigh Ann has graciously agreed to respond to them. Thank you. Yes, and if there's something Martha related, of course, we'll respond as well.
All righty. Thank you again, Janelle, and congratulations on your book tour. Kudos.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.